Welcome to Regular Achievers Educational Limited, presenting Royal Tutors, your trusted support for brain-friendly, high-impact learning. Today, we'll be looking at 10 plus 1 quotes every GCSE lesson learner must know and master in an inspector course. Now, the objective of this lesson is to memorize and analyze key quotes with precision and confidence, showing how Priestley's language structure and symbolism reveals his vision for a fair society. Now, let's unlock the moral thunder of Priestley's play, one quote at a time. Now, as a learner preparing for the GCSE exam, you must memorize at least 10 quotes from the set, and the quote you have chosen must have its richness in language devices, structural devices, symbolism, zoom in, zoom out where necessary, form and context. And you should also link quotes, contrast, character, mirror morals, connect beginnings and ends. Quotes is the skeleton, analyzing is the heartbeat. Fuse two of them and you will write like an examiner think. Okay, let's look at the first quote. It says, "We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other." Now here, when Inspector calls deliver his declaration, Priestley fuses religious imagery with social conscience, using the metaphor of one body to suggest humanity as a single organism whose health depends on unity. Spoken near the play's climax, the line becomes a moral sermon that contrasts sharply with Billings' early individualism. The collective now we creates a tone of inclusion and shares duty, transforming the inspector into a prophetic figure. Priestley's mouthpiece for socialist responsibility. Now we'll go to the context. To our 1954 audience recovering from two world wars, this reminder of interdependence would have resonated with urgent moral clarity. Now, this quote mirrors the theme, social responsibility, and you can use this quote to answer questions styles like how does Priestley use inspector to explore ideas of collective responsibility in an inspector course. The second quote is, "A man has to make his own way, has to look after himself." Before the inspector arrival, Belling's speech drips with confident repetition. This insistence that a man has to reveal both arrogance and isolation. The phrase embodies the self-serving capitalism Priestley seeks to expose, why its placement in the play opening established the ideology battlefield the inspector will later dismantle. Dramatic irony heightens Belling's foolish certainties. As the audience know, his prediction of prosperity and peace are disastrously wrong. Through Belling, Priestley ridicules the blindness of privilege, exposing how such selfless leader or selfish leader, I beg your pardon, or selfishness, leads to collective wrongs. Now, this quote mirrors the theme individualism and collectivism. Now, for this quote can be used to answer the examination style question: how does Priestley present the danger of selfishness and capitalism through Mr. Belling? Now for the third quote, "But these girls aren't cheap labor, they are people." This statement was said by Schiller. Schiller's outburst mark the awakening of conscience with a world obsessed with profit. The contrast between cheap labor and people encapsulates her shift from materialism to empathy. Her sentence fractured by the M dash as emotion interrupts inherited prejudice. Priestley uses her voice as a turning point, the youthful defiant symbolizing hope for moral renewal in a rigidly classed society, spoken against the backdrop of 1912 capitalism, but held by a 1945 audience longing for equality. Sheila's recognition becomes the echo of Priestley's own idealism, the belief that understanding others what can heal social division. Now, this quote mirrors the theme class and social equality, and this quote can be used to answer the exam style question: how does Priestley use Sheila to challenge her family's attitude towards class and social responsibility? Now we'll go to the fourth quote. The light should be pink and intimate until the inspector arrives. Priestley's stage directly transforms light into language. The shift from pink and intimate to bright and harder. Okay, the epilepsy and the ellipsis shows that there's a continuous statement there, symbolizing the exposure of hidden truth. The warm glow of confidence and complacency gives away to the piercing glare of moral revelation, preparing both character and audience for interrogation. This structural transition mirrors the inspector's role as catalyst. The physical change of lighting foreshadows the psychological and ethical illumination that follows. Through such meticulous control of stagecraft, Priestley turns the theatre itself into a moral lens through which deceit is stripped away. Now, this quote mirrors the theme truth and exposure, and the quote can be used to answer the exam style question: how does Priestley use stage direction and structure to present moral enlightenment in an inspector course? Now we'll go to the fifth quote. You are the kind of father a chap could go to when he's in trouble. Or I rephrase, you are not the kind of father a chap could go to when he's in trouble. Now, this statement was said by Eric. Here, Eric's confession pierces the illusion of middle class harmony, exposing emotional distance through the informal, almost pleading tone of chap. His words fractured the family's snare. Snare means facade, okay, kind of lie. A snare of respectability, revealing the coldness between Berlin's patriarchal authority. Structurally, this moment unveils or unravels the family dynamic, mirroring Priestley's wider critique of a society built on appearance rather than compassion. The pain embedded in Eric's admission transforms him from a careless youth to tragic witness, and the audience recognizes that moral failure begins not in the street but in the home. Now, this quote mirrors the theme family and generational conflict, And this quote can be used to answer the exam style question: how does Priestley present relationship within the Bellings family to explore emotional and moral failures? For quote 6, we have girls of that class, and this is a phrase made by Mrs. Belling. Mrs. Belling, unfinished sentence, slices through the air with all the violence of her prejudice. The abrupt dash halts the land, revealing how her language literally collapsed under the weight of snobbery. Priestley's use of fragmentation exposed a woman whose refinement marks cruelty. Her phrase, that clash, drips with contempt that turns people into categories. The broken syntax becomes symbolic of moral blindness, a linguistical war between the privileged and the poor. By letting her voice trail into silence, Priestley allows the absence of empathy to echo through or echo louder than words, indicating the brittle arrogance of the Edwardian respectability. Now, this quote mirrors the theme class prejudice and morality, and the quotes can be used to answer exam question styles and style questions like how does Priestley present Mr. Belling as a symbol of class arrogance and moral blindness. Now, for the seventh quote, it's I suppose we are all nice people. This was said by Sheila. Sheila's quiet irony lands sharper than any accusation. The casual, I suppose, cancels a moral dagger, her sarcasm exposing the hollow self-satisfaction of those who believe remorse equals redemption. Here, Priestley transforms her tone from naive politeness to moral clarity. This shift marks her complete evolution through understated irony. He shows that real change lies in reflection, not denial. The contrast between her insight and her parents' blindness symbolizes a generational handover, youth inheriting the conscience that age abandoned. What begins as a light quip ends as a lament for the future or the failure, I beg your pardon, for the failure of compassion. Now, this quote mirrors the theme guilt and moral hypocrisy. And for exam style question, it can be used to answer how those Priestley use iron to expose false morality in an inspector calls is excellent for contrasting Sheila's sincerity with her parents' complacency. Now, for the eighth quote, there are millions and millions and millions of Eva and John Smiths still left with us. This is the inspector's speech. The inspector's speech expands from the dinner or the dining table or the dining room to the whole of humanity through insistent repetition. Priestley's amplifies Eva Smith into our universal emblem of suffering. The rhythm of millions and millions echoes like a moral drumbeat. Each repetition piles weight upon the conscience of the audience, forcing them to confront the vast scale of exploitation. The pairing of Ella and John merges gender and class into one shared identity, turning the individual tragedy into collective warning. Priestley's oratory raises to rises to prophetic height here. Art becomes activism, and the theater becomes a pulpit of equality. Now, this quote mirrors social injustice and collective conscience, and this can be used to answer the exam style question: how does Priestley use the character of Eva Smith to represent wider societal issues? And it is perfect for exploring symbolism, repetition, and universal significance. Now, for quote 9, we have: there will be thoughts, it is fire and blood and anguish. The inspector's prophecy burns through the play's polite veneer. Veneer means a lie or a facade. The tricolor of fire, blood, and anguish thunders like judgment, compressing war, revolution, and moral reckoning into one apocalyptic vision. Priestley fuses biblical cadence with political warning, reminding his 1945 audience who had seen two world wars that ignorance breeds destruction. The rhythm grows biblical, almost inca, incantatory, almost incantatory, as if he were sermonizing the the conscience of the nation. In this final eruption, language itself becomes flame. The word must learn compassion to be consumed or be consumed by its absence. I'll take that again. In this final eruption, language becomes flame. The word must learn compassion or be consumed by its absence. Now, this quote mirrors the theme consequence and morality, and it can be used to answer the exam style question: how does Priestley warn audience about the consequence of ignoring social responsibility? Now, to quote 10, public men, Mr. Belling, have responsibility as well as privileges. Here, the inspector, um, the inspector's calm authority dismantles Belling's pomposity with the balance of the statement itself. The parallel structure mirrored the moral equilibrium. Priestley demands power must be weighed by duty. The measure phrasing cuts deep than anger, revealing truth through precision. Priestley contrasts the dignity of responsibility within the vulgarity of entitlement, turning this single line into ethnical cornerstone of the play, spoken by the embodiment of conscience to the emblem of greed. It crystallizes Priestley's message that statue without service is moral bankruptcy. Now, this quote mirrors the theme power and accountability, and for exam style question, it can be used to answer the question: how does Priestley present the abuse of power and moral duty in an inspector court? Now, the plus one quote. This is just an extra for you to, interchange with anyone you really want to, but you must memorize just 10. All right. Now this quote says, that was the police. A girl has just died. Now the ending folds the story back upon itself, transforming revolution into repetition. Priestley uses the cyclical structure to show that history restarts when lesson goes unlearned. The blunt, factual tone of a girl has just died mirrors the opening tragedy, yet this time it arrives stripped of drama, a chilling normalization of suffering. The echo of the inspector's earlier visit implies that society, deaf of moral warning, is trapped in a loop of its own making. By closing where he began, Priestley turns narrative into warning. If consequence slips, it's if consequence slips, time itself becomes the jailer. If consequence slips, time itself becomes the jailer. And this quote mirrors the theme circle of ignorance and learning. All right, and it can answer the exam style question: how does Priestley use its structure to emphasize that society must learn from its mistake? And this encourage analysis of cyclic structure, irony, and Priestley's moral warning. With this, we have come to the end of 10 quotes plus one in an inspector calls. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.